Hi, I'm Jim from Afora Pain Education. I'm coming today to talk about setback planning, which is, I think, one of the most important skills that you can work to develop if you are living with chronic or persisting pain and you're trying to find ways to improve your lives. So a setback plan is a technique that you can use to change your flare-up pains into something actually quite productive and quite useful in the history of your condition. So with that, I want to slide into the sharing my screen with this presentation. Give me just a second to set this up properly. And we're going to do from there. This is a bit more awkward than I'd like it to be. There we go. And lastly, there we are. Okay, setback planning and opportunity for growth. Now, I want to share the basic framework from which I'm understanding this stuff, and that is trying to help everyone to create more of a growth mindset as opposed to a fixed mindset. Because I believe with a growth mindset, you can look at the flare-up and analyze it and determine better what caused it and what you can do to eliminate it. And we'll talk so much more about this as we go along, but really the fixed mindset is very difficult to live with. If you think you have no hope if you have a fixed mindset. And hope, of course, is really critical if you're dealing with chronic persistent pain and you want to improve your life. So looking on a growth mindset is a skill that's important. This is a tool within specific to chronic and persisting pain that will help you do that. Now, my disclaimer for today is primarily that although I know a fair amount about pain, and I've been studying it for a long time, and I have some of my own that I manage quite successfully most of the time. But ultimately, I know nothing about your pain. And so the things that I say here may or may not agree with your experience. They may or may not be accurate for you. Whether that is true or not, I think it is important to try these techniques, to take a leap of faith. And even if you disagree with some of the basic underlying premises that I'm putting forth, to try the technique and see if there's any value in it. Don't miss out on that value just because you think I'm an idiot. Now, the underlying assumptions that I'm going to make today are these. One is that better understanding of what causes your pain will lead to less pain. And with that, I'm really referring to the power of story. As human beings, we all make stories to create meaning around our experiences. We never have full information. We fill in the gaps with the things that we expect to be true. It really is important to challenge some of those assumptions, to try to get that story a little bit more accurate. Second thing is that I believe pain to be generally predictive, not reactive. And when I say that, I'm really working from a functional definition of pain put forth by the Neuro-Orthopedic Institute, which is pain occurs when you are approaching a limit and some protection may be needed. And that is another way of saying that if you don't, when you have pain in a flare-up setting, you have not re-injured yourself. You're just coming to a point where your protective reactions are such that, ooh, we better stop. We better back off here a little bit. And Scott Morrison is a physical therapist in the US who is quoted with something that I'm going to paraphrase, which is protection is needed when we do too much too soon, after too little for too long. Last assumption that I'm making here is that fear, anxiety, frustration, and anger about the pain you feel when you have a flare-up will increase the intensity of that pain experience. You can help all of that with having a plan for setbacks. So I look at navigating this new terrain of having a body that is experiencing chronic or persisting pain as if you've got a map that is incorrect for the terrain that you're in right now. If you're trying to do things the way you did before you had chronic pain, things don't work the same way. It's a little bit as if you're still using your map from Kalamazoo, Michigan, now that you're living in Boise, Idaho. You can look at the map all you want. It won't really help you figure out what to do. You have to create a new map. And the data points for creating that new map actually occur in part during the flare-up. So how do we do it? There are 3 steps. The first step is right now, today, or as soon as you can, start to write down the things that have given you strength in difficult times so that you can remember them and what has worked for you in the past. Now, it could be anything like distraction, or it could be movement, or it could be rest, or it could be hot or cold or 10 unit or laughter, art, going into seclusion. It could be almost anything that you have done in the past. But what will happen when you have a flare up, if you're like most of the people that I've worked with, they panic. And if you're panicking, then you're not remembering all the things that have been successful for you in the past to get through this. Now, for my clients, I have created a 3x5 card. And this is an image of the front and back of the card. On the top left is when things are going well, you tend to think, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to step by step by step by step, and it's a smooth process. But we all know if you've got chronic persisting pain that there will be flare-ups. It might as well plan in advance for them because their reality looks a little bit more rocky or bumpy, like the terrain pictured in the bottom left. And I have people put that card on their refrigerator or on their bathroom mirror or on their computer monitor, someplace where they will see it every day, such that it reminds them not only that the path sometimes is challenging, but also that they're always moving forward and that they have the plan, which is then on the back of the card. Now, on the back of the card that I hand out, I give some suggestions about where to start with 3 things to remember. 1, it's a setback, not a start over, that this will pass, and also to remember your breathing exercises, because we use breathing exercises. I use breathing exercises a lot to help calm down the fear and anxiety and the intensity of pain when a flare-up occurs. It's the first tool that I generally train patients in to help give them some sense of control over the pain that they're experiencing. As we all know, sometimes when you have chronic persisting pain, it feels like it has a mind of its own. Our job is to try to figure out what that pain might be telling us. And if there's something we can do about it, that's a good thing. There's a couple of blank spaces there for you to fill in things that you like, but I'm going to invite you to take a screenshot of this if you'd like, and then post it yourself. Make 5, 6 copies, put it all over the place if you need to. Just remember that you have a plan. Now, step 2. Step 2, we need to introduce a concept called total load. In scientific literature, it's called the total allostatic load. And the allostatic load is all of the various stressors that our bodies are experiencing at any point in time. Now, I love the quote, you only see what you look for, and you only look for those things that you believe are important. And for most of us, when we have flare-ups, we tend to think about the physical challenges we've experienced exclusively, and we forget about some of the other challenges. And for that, the images that I'd like to share are the following. Okay, the iceberg analogy is classic. There's so much important stuff that lies below the surface. Social stresses, physical stresses, lack of sleep, smoking, all that sort of stuff. And the other analogy that I use is the straw that broke the camel's back. Okay, we tend to blame the last straw, but we don't blame the diet. We don't blame the history of trauma, all the other sorts of things that go on. Now, one of the things I like about this straw that broke the camel's back analogy is that it's the total load that's the challenge. Let's say you have a history of trauma. Let's say you've had a history of a motor vehicle accident, and there's lots of physical trauma as well as emotional, psychological trauma related to that. Those things may not ever go away, but you can still lighten the load. It's the total load that makes the difference. So you got a couple of choices here. You either get the camel stronger or take some load off, and it doesn't matter what load is necessarily. So just because there's old stuff there doesn't mean you can't live with much, much less pain than you have now. And this is a load that we might want to be considering in these days over the course of the last year with the pandemic. For some people, winter is always a load. For some people, it's a joy. I love winter, but not everyone does that. Step 3, revise and update the plan. Because every time you have a flare-up, you have the opportunity to look back and say, okay, this is what I think was helpful. Now, this is what I think was the cause. How can I address those issues now? Use this as an opportunity for learning, not repeating. I love the Archibald MacLeish quote. Only one thing more painful than learning from experience, and that is not learning from experience. So if you want to put it together, each time you have a flare-up, it really is a learning opportunity. Each time you have a success, it's also a learning opportunity. Work to turn that negative of the flare-up into a positive. Look deeply into all your possible stressors. Now, it is important to recognize that we don't have the full perspective ever. So in terms of setback planning, it really is helpful to have a trusted other, someone else who can help you put things into perspective, things that they might think are important that you might not have noticed. So, as I mentioned earlier, in one of the very first slides, we all create stories about what's going on with us, and we never have full information. So if you can create a system of trusted others that can help you debrief over what was going on, you will have better success with this approach. And then, of course, being persistent with it. Okay. So breaking bad habits, or creating good habits, however you want to look at that, it's really sometimes challenging to do. So staying persistent with a habit that seems to be working well is really important for you. There's a reason why we call certain foods comfort foods. They comfort us because they take us back to our childhood primarily. But my comfort foods are not necessarily healthy for me right now. At my age and with my weight, I need to cut certain things out. But if I have stress, I go back to those comfort foods. Pacing is a frustrating thing to work on sometimes. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. So, in addition to the map analogy, sometimes I use the puzzle analogy. And in the puzzle concept, you are the one that has to be building the puzzle, but you can't be the only one. You have to help sometimes. Find those edge pieces. See that the piece is turned upside down. You got to turn it right side up. An extra set of eyes sometimes helps that. But ultimately, it's your job to put this all together because nobody else possibly can, because nobody else feels what you feel, reacts in the same way that you react. It is, unfortunately, perhaps, but the reality is it is your job to do. If you can do that job well, then you're going to be in pretty good shape. Things will improve. Hope will be realistic at that point. I'm going to repeat this screen, this slide, so I have a chance to take a screenshot of that. And that's the presentation. I hope you find this useful. I hope if you have any questions about it, please contact me at jim@aforapainaeducation.com is an email address, or you can send something on the Facebook page where you're seeing this now. And I thank you for your time. Bye-bye.